Hello everyone, welcome back to another video where today we're going to be taking a look at the consolidated viewing figures for Season 2, Episode 3, The Well, as well as a look at the pre-broadcast figures for Doctor Who Episode 4, Lucky Day. And I think it's good news today, but before we get into it, do me a teeny little favour and click that subscribe button. It'd be very much appreciated. We are trying to get to 30,000 subscribers as soon as possible. I do regular Doctor Who content here on the channel and any support would be greatly appreciated. But let's dive right in. Ratings boost for Doctor Who, with consolidated figures up on previous week, remaining the BBC's biggest show of the day. More details, and yeah, I'm going to look at TV Zone's report. Doctor Who continued on BBC One last weekend with The Well, which scored overnight audience of 1.9 million. This was BBC One's highest primetime rating of the day. BARB data has now been released, which shows The Well has consolidated to 3.24 million after 7 days. This figure includes those who watched from 8 AM on the day of release and includes those who watched on devices such as phones and computers. Overall, the episode was the 25th most watched programme of the week. That's actually slightly incorrect on TV Zone's end. According to BARB's website, it was 23rd, but still. But the BBC's biggest programme of the day and the third across all channels. So this is the key thing, right? Obviously it's 23rd for the week, which, yes, I would like it to be a little bit higher in the charts. However, if we take a look at Saturday specifically, the three shows on top for Saturday were Britain's Got Talent with 5.1 million, The 1% Club with just over 4 million, and then Doctor Who with 3.2. Bizarrely, Doctor Who even beat out the FA Cup, which is a little bit bizarre. But anyway, yeah, Doctor Who was the most watched thing on the BBC on Saturday, but even more than that, it was the third most watched thing on Saturday overall last week. So when we talk about Doctor Who being dead, and when we talk about, you know, the idea of it being cancelled, I need people to understand that this is not like the same as 1989. I know I've made the comparison to the McCoy era before, and while I do think that there are parallels that we can draw just in terms of like overall public sentiment towards the show, it's important to acknowledge that they would have killed to be the #1 show on the BBC on Saturday when McCoy's era was going out. I can tell you that for a fact. And we know this because of Adam Martin's videos where he collates the viewing figures for every single Doctor. And when it comes to season 26, which is the season that this is most often compared to, as it has the most comparable viewing figures, we can see that 3.1 million, which is just under what The Well got, landed Doctor Who in 102nd place in the top 40, compared to now, where 3.2 lands you in 23rd and first for Saturday. I wonder as well if this is partly an indication that the dominance of Saturday viewing is kind of dwindling away amidst the ability to watch anything at any time, because it used to be that everyone would go and watch TV specifically on Saturday, but now looking at this, given the fact that Race Across the World aired on Wednesday and Beyond Paradise aired on Friday, it's kind of challenging the idea that Saturday is the big day for TV, that we all still kind of assume that it is. But yeah, essentially what I'm trying to say is that 3 million viewers in 1989 is a lot worse than 3 million viewers in 2025. Consider that there were a lot less channels in 1989 and no streaming services either, which really puts into perspective this figure. And obviously, as you can see, Battlefield's rating improves across its parts, but it doesn't reach any higher than 89. It's also good to see that the numbers seem to be holding relatively steady. They're not really going down drastically. They're staying relatively, hovering around that 3 million mark. And I imagine that'll be roughly the case for episode 4, Lucky Day, as well. And we actually have an update on Lucky Day. According to William, who I believe, from what I saw, is taking this from Gallifrey base, Lucky Day has become the most streamed episode this series so far, with 172,000 viewers. First episode this season to reach more than 100k. This takes Doctor Who to indeed being the #1 show on Saturday on BBC One when you take streaming into consideration. So yeah, this is the biggest streaming figure for Doctor Who. There's a couple of factors to this. For starters, it was a bank holiday, so a lot of people would have been out, which is partly why a lot more people would have been streaming it as opposed to watching it live. But I also wonder if there's an element to it of good word of mouth catching up. For context, by the way, as far as I'm aware, Tom Spilsbury, who is the Doctor Who magazine ratings correspondent, he said on Gallifrey Base that the pre-transmission figures for The Whale were around 70,000, so pre-transmission being the ones who watched it from 8 AM onwards, which is quite low. So to see Lucky Day get a boost of this by about 100,000 is significant, and could potentially suggest that good word of mouth for Doctor Who is spreading. So I think when you look at it in totality, is Doctor Who doing the best it could be doing? No, I would like to see it coming closer to the top 10, maybe hovering around sort of where the 1% Club is, around 4 million. I think that would be good. But I think anyone expecting it to get like 7 or 8 million is kidding themselves when you consider that the absolute peak of the TV schedules that week was 5.8. The absolute peak for Saturday was 5.1. Doctor Who on 3.2 in that context doesn't seem all that bad when you actually weigh it up. It's not the best result in the world, but it's not the apocalyptic result that I'm seeing it reflected as by a lot of the outrage merchants online. I think the absolute worst case scenario is Disney drop out, the show goes away for a year or two, and then we just get a new series in 2027 on a lower BBC budget, likely with a new Doctor. That to me is honestly the worst case scenario, because I just don't see a reality where the BBC cancel it, because it's still their most watched thing on a Saturday. That's what I need you to realise. Like, I can tell you for a fact that wasn't a case in the 80s. It just wasn't. So it just kind of goes to show, again, as I've said before, the general state of television decline. Again, even in that context, I would like Doctor Who to be doing a bit better, but it's also not like sound the alarms. The show is going off the air. It really is. Yes, the numbers are lower than they have been previously, but that's because, as I said, everything's numbers are lower than they are previously. I can tell you now that Britain's Got Talent getting 5 million would have been seen as a disaster 15 years ago. But let me know what you guys think. As always, I'm sure I'll get absolutely wonderful comments on this video telling me I'm coping and stuff, but ultimately only the BBC can really decide what number is big enough to justify them keeping broadcasting it. But for now, I think it's doing just well enough to stay on in the short term, provided the BBC has enough money to keep funding it moving forward, which is another issue entirely. It's also worth saying that I stand by my previous assertions that Doctor Who would do a lot better if A, it wasn't scheduled right opposite Britain's Got Talent, which is the biggest show on Saturday week over week, but also if it was on later in the year. I think these days Doctor Who does perform better when the weather's a bit colder, when it's a bit darker, you know, it kind of gets people in the mood for a more kind of dark sci-fi horror-y type thing. So yeah, that's my opinion on that. I know that in RTD1 it aired in April, but again, April back then was nowhere near as hot as April is now. I can tell you in this little office with these studio lights beaming on me, I've been boiling in here. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Comment down below your thoughts, like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.